A few days ago, we spoke about some of the changes coming in codenamed Frontiers for Destiny 2, and many of the really big reworks that Bungie have outlined regarding rewards, difficulty customization, the director, solo player activities, endgame, and even the roadmap approach overall. So if you wanted a bit of a roundup of what to expect with the expansions this year, I'll link that video below, but it did trigger an interesting conversation regarding rewards. Especially when it comes to weapons, the conversation around crafting, enhancement, and how all of our stuff right now, the Heresy content, our existing rewards, and even things that we'll get from Rite of the Nine, which will be pretty close to when we get the next expansion, and how all of that will change and interact with the content that we'll get in the upcoming expansions. So, as we've seen, Bungie will be adding tiers to weapons and armor. Armor will be getting new stat archetypes, as well as set bonuses, which sound pretty interesting. And Bungie have said regarding rewards, in the past, only a narrow range of activities have received updated rewards in seasons, which leads to a narrow selection of activities worth playing. Additionally, reward pools have tended to not be very deep, with most chases bottoming out with weapon perk rolls or crafting recipes, and armor not really mattering much at all. And these problems have resulted in shallow, unsatisfying grinds in a tiny subset of activities actually available to play, with their best rewards being a matter of luck rather than skill or mastery. And that's why they're adding challenge customization and reward tiers to the game. These reward tiers will affect weapons, so as Bungie showed us, we have a tier 5 weapon here, and the indication is that all available weapon perks will actually be enhanceable in the future, or will be enhanced by the tier itself, so we can see that affects magazines and barrels, and even origin traits, on top of the core weapon traits. Bungie even answered some of the frequently asked questions regarding these, so will new gear mean that old gear is being sunset? And Bungie have said no, existing gear remains unchanged and ready for use in any activity, except those set aside for experimenting with specific gear. It can be infused to achieve the same power as any newly introduced gear, but the only specific advantage of using new gear will be some artifact synergies comparable to origin traits found on existing artifacts. Plus, they added that we'll still be able to obtain old gear. However, in terms of weapon crafting, they say it's not going away and will continue to be a way to craft a specific role of a weapon. But the intent is for crafting going forward to provide a catch-up mechanism for roles you weren't able to nab from the original sources. This may be because the source is no longer available or was gated by lockouts when it was, but ultimately, we want crafting to support the weapon chase and not to replace it. They did say they'd follow up with more details in a future article, but that discussion hasn't happened just yet. So I have seen questions in the community about gear in general, but also some of the rewards that we're earning right now in Heresy. Of course, we're grinding for shiny weapons, adept drops, and we even have upcoming events like Rite of the Nine, which will have updated adept versions of dungeon weapons. So it's an interesting one because Bungie have said the only specific advantage to new gear will be some artifact synergies comparable to origin traits. However, it's going to depend to an extent whether our existing gear can actually be upgraded to be comparable with the Frontiers gear. So, if you have an adept heresy weapon or one of the Rite of the Nine weapons when we get them, obviously if we can somehow enhance those, theoretically they would benefit from the same advantages that tier 5 weapons would get in Frontiers. Whereas if we can't do that, obviously we wouldn't be looking at having boosted magazine or barrel options, improving stats on weapons, or indeed enhanced origin traits. So it certainly opens an interesting question with regards to how much better new gear will be in Frontiers. So I'm hoping that Bungie will speak about this soon, as obviously it will probably leave a bit of a sour taste if some of our most recently earned rewards from Heresy are kind of power crept out of being relevant. But going back to Frontiers rewards, they've said the higher tiers of weapons and armor will be available from the full range of core game activities, as rewards for higher challenge tiers and mastery of those activities. And reward pools will be complete sets of weapons and armor that are available as rewards from one or more activities. Some weapons are shared across multiple pools, but the majority of weapons and all armor are unique to a single pool. And this is in relation to some of the new activity buckets that Bungie will introduce, like Solo Ops or Pinnacle Ops. But again, there is a question as to whether we'll be able to apply that to some of our older existing rewards. And every time Bungie release a piece of content in the Frontiers era, they've said new gear will be a blanket category for all of the weapons and armor newly introduced in the current season, regardless of the source. So it'll receive a special visual treatment to help players identify which weapons or armor sets are new, and which may therefore benefit from from things like artifact bonuses. Some artifact bonuses, which previously applied to specific perks like origin traits, will now be pointed towards a wider category of new gear instead, which will provide more and clearer buildcraft options and make for shorter tooltips in the artifact. A new gear may be required in specific optional activities where players are looking for a level playing field, so examples include a Crucible playlist option for players who want to play with and against newly introduced gear, and seasonal events centered on posting high scores in specific activities. So that's a bit of explanation around how some of these rewards will be earned and sort of categorized in Frontiers. But much like weapons getting further enhancements in the upcoming expansions, armor will get tiers as well, as we mentioned, with set bonuses, stat archetypes, and probably some other sandbox elements to encourage players to actually go ahead and earn the new armor. In terms of old armor, Bungie have said it'll be changed as little as possible, but because the change to stat mechanics and types are global changes, old armor pieces will have their stat types but not their values changed around. So when possible, these changes will be to the most similar stat, but with some stats being fundamentally reworked, this won't always be possible. So keep that in mind. Some of your existing armor will have stats kind of switched around and changed. They basically won't look identical when Frontiers drops to what they look like right now. Then in terms of exotic armor, they've said updating the exotic armor pursuit is on the roadmap, but won't be part of the initial update that is focusing on legendary armor. So when Apollo drops, exotics will be very similar to what we have now, and to make sure that exotics and their build-defining perks remain a compelling option, we're working out a design that will allow players to update their exotic armor to bring their stat bonuses in line with the changes to legendary armor. So that, in a way, is an indication that armor will not be able to be upgraded to the Frontiers level if it's been earned before the expansions. I don't believe we've had the same clarification for weapons, so that's why I was posing the question before. But going on, they say the exotic class items introduced in the final shape are a special case. Even though legendary class items will be gaining full random stats with the update, we don't wish to add additional randomness to the exotic class item chase, so instead, we will be providing a method for players to update their existing exotic class items with additional stats of their choosing to bring them in line with the stat contribution of the new legendary class items. So many changes coming up in the expansions that we'll get this year. That was kind of the purpose of this video, to both recap on what Bungie have actually said about reward changes, but additionally to pose that kind of question about whether our existing weapons will be able to be upgraded to the same qualities that we'll get in the new expansions. Bungie have pretty much clarified that won't be the case for most armor, so legendaries will be left behind essentially. So I do wonder whether we'll even get armor drops from Ride of the Nine, for instance, unless of course Bungie create a way that we can earn them and then update them in Frontiers. Then in terms of crafting, of course, what appear to be enhanced perks on tiered weapons in the future seems like it'll have a bit of a conflict of interest with crafting as we've known it in the past, right? Of course, Bungie have moved away from crafting in terms of seasonal drops, outside of updated raid pools and things like that, for a couple of episodes now. So they've said it won't be going away, but it certainly is not going to be the primary way to earn weapons. And I would say that those enhanced perks that we appear to be getting complicate that relationship even further. So it's going to be very interesting to see how all of this comes together when we start getting more reveals for it. So I guess the question is, how do you guys feel about it? To what extent do you think our existing weapons should be able to be brought forward into Frontiers and sort of upgraded? Or indeed, would you prefer to have more of a refresh where new rewards in the game moving forward are the most relevant things? Definitely share your thoughts or any concerns you have down in the comments section. These will of course be some of the things that Bungie have to tackle and outline as they start to reveal more about the expansions. So I'm looking forward to that, but for today guys, that is what we have to talk about. So give us your thoughts below. If you've enjoyed the video, a rating really does help us out as well. Otherwise though, cheers for watching, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.